Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. Well, what is the state of book publishing? What's important about a book? What do you need to know? What do you need to do? Most important, what do you need not to do? Well, I have one of the OG publishing experts, Terry Whalin. Welcome to the show.
David, great to be here with you.
So you have written this fantastic book right here. This is 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed. And I've been around the publishing block, nowhere near as much as you, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But some of these things, I was like, yeah, no, that makes sense. And I would say at least 7 out of the 10, it was like a total Scooby-Doo moment for me. I was like, what? Oh my gosh, that's so insightful, that especially in this publishing environment, right? So we're looking at 2025, 2026. What does it take to be successfully published today as an executive, as an entrepreneur, as a thought leader? So for the folks that don't know your amazing and deep background, could you just share a little bit about your professional journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today, and what were some fun pit stops along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. I've actually written more than 60 books for traditional publishers. And my very first book was a little children's book that I did in 1992. It was a little book. I was at a writers' conference, and I always recommend writers go to conferences because that's a great place to meet people and figure out how this business works. But I was out walking with an editor, and she said, Terry, I've got a problem. That I've got all these children's books that we publish at David C. Cook, and our mission is supposed to be to tell kids about the world and how it's a big world out there. We don't have a single book that talks about that. What kind of ideas do you have? And so at that time, my kids were little. And so I was reading these books to them called Howard Had a Hot Air Balloon, Howard Had a Spaceship. They were done by Stephen Lawhead, but he published under Steve Lawhead at Lion Publishing. And they combined real pictures with a cartoon character. And I said to this editor, I said, what if we used real pictures from around the world combined with a cartoon character to show kids that they could go anywhere in the world? She said, oh, that's a great idea, Terry. Write that up and send that to me. And so I made a little note. I went home and I wrote it up and I sent it to her. And that ultimately became my first book, published in 1992. Now, since then, I was writing for magazines, and I've written more than all these books over the years. Twice in my career, I've gotten 6-figure advances for the book from traditional publishers. A couple of my books have sold over 100,000 copies. I guess that would be a high point. That one of those books was a diet book, actually, that I wrote in 14 days for a publisher. People buy diet books in January, right? They make New Year's resolutions. They want to lose weight, all that kind of stuff. So this book is the foundational book for a ministry called First Place. And it has sold over 100,000 copies of the book. My name's on the cover of all of them, but I was a hired gun for the publisher back then. So I haven't been paid in over 20 years for this book, but it's a good credit is the way I look at it.
So let's talk about this, and we're not going to go down all of the myths, but there are so many great nuggets in your book, in the 10 Publishing Myths book. You start out going right for the jugular. Number one, I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to make a lot of money as the author of a book. Debunk that for us, or give us your riff on that, please.
Well, And I've heard this statement from people, whether they're being published by one of the big five publishers or whether they're self-publishing. They all figure they're going to make a lot of money on the book. Now, you may make a lot of money on your book, but that shouldn't be your primary reason for doing a book, because, the reality is, depending on what number you want to use, I mean, there's over 4,500 or over 11,000 new books that come out every day. And so there's a lot of competition out there in this market. So you have to be realistic about what's going to happen with your book. I mean, I've heard New York Times bestselling authors that have just done their taxes tell me that they, maybe 10% of their income for the last year was from their book. So you really can't figure that you're going to make a lot of money with your book. Now, by publishing your book, though, that does show that you're an authority on the topic, shows that it opens doors for podcasting, radio shows, speaking gigs. All kinds of great things can happen because you are an authority on your topic. So that's a good reason for doing the book, rather than that I'm going to make a lot of money.
Yes. Well, it's funny. You mentioned this in your bio, and this is absolutely true. You have sat on all sides of the desk in the publishing business, which is really rare. So as an author, as a publisher, as a strategist, as a co-author, hired gun, as you said a moment ago, it is a very interesting time now in the publishing world. And I know this goes a little bit back into the history, but you talk about a specific wake-up call or wake-up moment that you had when you were wearing your author hat. And can you tell us what happened in that wake-up moment as an author?
Yeah, David. I was a literary agent in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I had a small literary agency. And back then, Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, was having this big event out in Los Angeles called Mega Book Marketing University in 2007. So he invited me to come as an agent and take pitches from people during the event. Well, at that point in my life, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. So they were making pretty books, they were putting them in the bookstore, all that. But when you write books for traditional publishers, typically 4 times a year, maybe once a year, they will send you a royalty statement to tell you how you're doing on your sales for the book. Yeah. Well, all of my statements back then were in the minus category. They were getting advances, but I wasn't making any money. So it's like, gee, I must be doing something wrong, here in this process. So when I was at Mega Book Marketing University, I was with 400 people. I decided to sit there with all of them and listen and see if maybe I could figure out what in the world was going on. And it was almost like about halfway through that conference, it's almost like I had been asleep and I woke up and I realized how little I was doing personally to be telling people about my book. Sure, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I was doing almost nothing else back then. And I really realized that I had to be active as an author to be doing something. Now, one of the speakers at that event was Jack Canfield, the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul. Yeah. And he's got this book that I have on my shelf up here called The Success Principles, where he's really studied what does it take to be successful? Well, the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100%. We want somebody else to do it. We want some publisher or agent or marketer, please, somebody other than us. But I decided during that event that I was going to change and I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success. So this was in the early days of blogging. So I decided to start blogging. And so I've been blogging every week on my blog. And I found an article over a year ago that said there's over 600 million blogs out there, David. But this particular article listed the top 27 content producers. And my name was one of those 27. And it's not that I do anything magical here. I've just been blogging every week consistently since I started my blog. And I have over 1,700 entries, which is a lot of content in that blog. And that's I think a message that every author can have here from me is if you're persistent and consistent in your practices, then that's what's going to make the real difference here out there.
Hold on. This one is so good, even I'm taking notes. Listen, are you a CEO, founder, or corporate executive ready to fix your market obscurity problem and gain the market eminence you know you and your company deserve? Cool. Book your private Market Eminence Roadmap call with me, and let's see what might be possible for you. The link is simple. doitmarketing.com/call. See you over there. Now, I got to get back to taking more notes. Now, let's talk about the book itself, the 10 publishing myths. You obviously talk to and work with hundreds and hundreds of authors and agents and publishing houses. Did you just get tired of all the misinformation or all the crazy, half-truths out there? Or what was the driver for you to write and publish this book?
I guess it was a couple of things. One of the things that I know about publishing from being in it a long time is there's so much of the process that's totally outside of my control as an author. So I can't make a bookstore buy your book or carry your book. I can't make a reader go in there and buy your book. None of that. But there are some things that I can control. And so from talking to authors all the time, they would tell me, well, my audience is over on YouTube, or my audience is on Facebook or LinkedIn or one of those kind of places. Yeah. Well, sure, I'm on those platforms, but I don't own those platforms. And so in the business, we call those rented platforms because knowingly or unknowingly, I could violate their terms and get kicked off of them tomorrow. So you don't want to really build your stuff over there. You want to be building your stuff on things that you can control, your own blog, your own website, your own newsletter, things that you have control over. So that's really part of the emphasis in this book. I was trying to show authors that sort of the path that we all have to follow here to really find our own readers and find our audience at the end of the day. Yes.
I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions anytime that we have a successful author and publishing expert. So state of the industry as you see it from your chair, traditional publisher, hybrid publisher, self-publishing, what criteria should people be using, whether they're an established author and they're looking at their next book, or maybe they're a first-time author looking for their first book? You lay it out really brilliantly, and there are also some kind of warnings and traps and tips in here about going extreme self-publishing, going with one of the big publishers, or using one of the new hybrid sort of, best of both alternatives. What criteria should people use when they're thinking about that choice?
Well, I think just like you've laid out here, David, they basically need to understand there's three paths. I mean, you can go the traditional route if you want to, but in general, you have to find an agent. You in general have to have some, what we call a platform. You have to some extensive connections to readers, because if you don't have those connections, then traditional publishers and literary agents aren't going to be interested in you coming with them. Yeah. And that number keeps going up through the years. I mean, a few years ago, it was 5,000. Now it's like 15,000 that they want. And so can you show that you have those kind of connections? If not, you're wasting your time to be sending stuff to those traditional houses. Yeah. Like right now on the traditional world, they're basically booking books for 2027 and 2028. And so can you wait that long? Those are other things that you have to bring into the class. Then some people say, well, okay, I'll just self-publish with Amazon. You can certainly do that. Anybody can do that. I've been with Morgan James Publishing as an acquisitions editor now for the last 13 years. We've been in business 21 years. We've sold over 20 million books, 6,000 titles, 29 New York Times bestsellers, over 200 times on the USA Today Wall Street Journal bestseller list. our books are in 98% of the bookstores in North America, including the brick and mortar stores. Yeah. So, very broad distribution. I mean, the other day I was looking for one of our book covers, and the very first place I found it was at Target.com because we sell books at Target. So, what kind of thing do you want to be with your book? I encourage people to come to Morgan James because you have more control. You keep all your author rights. We've got a great reputation. So you want to look at the reputation of whatever way you're going to do. My founder at Morgan James has a brand new book that's out called the Babylon Blueprint for Authors. He spends about 40 pages in this book talking about these three different options, and naturally, the one that he calls hybrid is the best place for you to go. But you have to choose. You have to learn and figure out whether that. And I've seen people spend $10,000-$15,000 on the self-publishing side of things. So you have to really just get all the information and take a look at it and see what's the best one for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you paint a really sort of bleak picture about this extreme self-publishing where you are chief cook and bottle washer, you're doing the cover design, or you're managing the cover designer, you're contracting the interior design, you're getting your own ISBN, you're setting up your author website, you're doing the proofreading or managing the proofreader. My first couple of books that we're not even going to mention because they were written 20 plus years ago, I did extreme self-publishing. I don't recommend it to my worst enemy. There are so many moving parts, so many parts where you can screw it up. Just being ignorant of how it's supposed to work or how it's supposed to look is going to cost you serious mistakes. Please add to that if I forgot anything about why people shouldn't do it themselves.
You're exactly right, David. For example, here recently with one of my books at Morgan James, it was a children's book, and the metadata, which hardly anybody thinks about, was totally messed up for this book. Well, we have somebody at Morgan James that works on metadata full time. That's her job. And so we went to her, in an hour or so, she slammed out the new metadata, and then in a couple of days it was populated on websites all over the world. So somebody has to know how to do that kind of stuff to fix it,
Yeah. I'm wondering, because we can't really talk about publishing in 2025, 2026 without talking about AI. Where does AI play a role? What can we say to authors who are either afraid of the AI competition, like, oh my God, everyone's writing a book with AI now, and this, multiplier effect of so much content being cranked out by the robots, and then also not just authors who are afraid of AI. What can we say to authors who are hoping that AI can write their book? It's kind of two different angles on the AI/chat GPT conversation. Please tackle that in whatever order you prefer.
Well, the thing that you have to be concerned about, I think, as an author somewhat, is the whole AI plagiarism issue, where AI can take this and that and put it together. And if they don't tell you where it came from, then you can be accused of plagiarism with your manuscript, which is not what you want to be doing as an author. You open yourself up for lawsuits and all kinds of things here. So you want to be very careful with how you use the AI. I think AI is really great for the research and for finding ideas and getting a list of bookstores, for example, and some things like that. It's really great. But I think if you overuse it, then that can really be a problem. I know in children's books, for example, AI can take black and white photos and change them into color images.
Yeah.
The problem here is that you can't really copyright those images. So, there's just some still real practical questions that we're trying to work out as far as how this all works out in the market, so that it's going to be okay to use it at the end of the day. So it's got some issues. So you want to be cautious and wise, I guess, is what I'd say about how you use it. I know at Morgan James, where I work, we've started, for example, as we send a contract to an author, we send an evaluation of the manuscript. And it's a real detailed evaluation. Now, I don't know exactly how they're making that, but I suspect they're using some sort of AI tool to help them put that all together. And then, but it's a very valuable input for the author. So I think that's really great that we're doing that kind of thing for our authors.
Yeah. Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. One of the things that made me sort of do a Scooby-Doo in your book here is you said you should always do a book proposal, even if you never plan to send your book to a traditional publisher. Talk to us, Terry. Why is that so important?
Well, I've written a couple of proposals that got six-figure advances, and I know how hard it is to write a really good proposal. But I also know the importance of it, because that proposal, whether you're writing nonfiction, fiction, children's books, whatever kind of book you're writing, that book is your business plan. And that's where you really lay out, who's your readership? What marketing are you going to do? Who's the competition to this book? Why are you the best person to write it out? You give sort of a chapter by chapter outline. I mean, there's a lot of valuable information that you pull together to get that proposal together. I've actually written a book, and you know this about me. I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell, 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. I wrote that book as a frustrated acquisitions editor because I was not getting the type of submissions that I wanted. The first version of that book has over 150 five-star reviews out there. It's helped a lot of people find a publisher, find a literary agent, get an advance. But publishing has changed a lot since that happened. So a couple of years ago, I wrote a revised edition of this book. And people can get that book for me for free if they go to bookproposals.ws. You can get the ebook version of that book, the whole book. You can get that for me from free.
Amazing. Very, very generous. And we'll put all of the links, by the way, that Terry's going to mention, including that one, directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. You'll see the live link, so you can pop right over there. Tell us a little bit about New York Times bestseller status. You mentioned at Morgan James, we have this many New York Times bestsellers, USA Today bestseller, Wall Street Journal bestseller. There is so much mythology built up around this New York Times best-selling author. Is it a game? Is it real? Is it a mirage in the desert? What is it?
Well, to get on the New York Times list is kind of like the gold standard within the publishing business, but it's also an editorial decision, as I understand it, to get on the New York Times list. Sometimes people have sold enough books to actually get on the list, but the editorial team at the New York Times will look at it and say, I don't like the content of that book, so that person doesn't get on. In general, I understand within the industry, you have to sell around 11,000 copies of a book in a 7-day period through that secret list of brick and mortar and online bookstores that report to the New York Times. So it's almost like winning an Oscar in the book business, very hard to do. I think it's easier in some ways to get on the USA Today and the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. We actually had a book in August at Morgan James that got on the USA Today list organically. Now, it was number 66, but it got on the list of 150 best-selling books. So I think that's pretty amazing. And as I understand it, these authors, they didn't pay to get on the list. They just did those kinds of things that we tell people to do, to promote their book, to get on podcasts and radio shows and have a newsletter and just all the kinds of typical marketing things that people have to do to get a book out there.
Yes. This is about books, but it's sort of not about books, which is the surprise twist. You mention that I have to publish a book to call myself a writer. And at first I'm looking at this going, well, Terry, of course you have to publish a book to call yourself a writer. Isn't that what the whole 10 myths is about? But you have a very innovative, very cool strategy that you talk about in that chapter. Can you share it with us?
Yeah, I think anybody that writes really should be able to call themselves a writer, no matter what they are. And so what a lot of people don't realize is that within the book business, if your book sells 5,000 copies over the lifetime of the book, that's a good number. Mm-hmm. But there's some other ways to get the word out about your book. And one of the best ways, I think, is in the whole print magazine area of the market. Yeah. And you could take part of your book, a piece of it, and they're all these magazines are looking for personal experience stories. So take a personal experience story of yours, have a beginning, a middle, an end, and a takeaway, like a single point, and look at the writer's guidelines and send that out to publications, because it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with the magazine world.
Yeah.
I find this a lot of times from talking to writers. It's like, I never thought about that. It's like,
that's how it struck me
about that.
Yes, that's totally how it struck me. But it also reminds me of a story. My friend Steven Shapiro, his third or fourth book, I think, was called Goal-Free Living. And he somehow had a connection to Oprah and Oprah's magazine, some editorial director, submissions person, and sent a pitch for an article. And they printed it in the print magazine of, it was called O Magazine, right? Oprah's magazine was called O. And that reached millions of people. And so he already had the book, but I imagine that if you're in this magazine world, as you have been, as well as being in the book world, you could parlay some of those magazine credits into a publishing contract.
Oh, absolutely. And those of us that are in publishing, book publishing, we're looking for people that have been published to publish them some more. So yes, those publishing credits really are incredibly valuable. And, almost every magazine, David, people don't realize this, but almost every magazine has writer's guidelines. So Google whatever magazine you want to write for, read their guidelines. That's where the editor tells you what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So funny thing, if you write it up and send them what they're looking for, then you have a higher probability of interesting them and getting your stuff printed in there. Who would know?
Exactly right. It's funny how when you give people what they want, they're much more open to accepting it.
That's right. Nobody thinks about that.
Nobody
they just
thinks about that.
I'm going to send this to X, but they don't look at the guidelines.
Yes. Well, and so the mantra might be, don't submit what you want to write, submit what they want to publish.
That's it.
And your chances go up. Your chances go up. So we talked about the book, 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed, but there's actually more than 10 myths. There is a secret myth known as number 11. Can you talk about why you wrote the 11th myth and where people might be able to get a sneak peek at it?
Yeah, I gathered endorsements for this book. And Alice Kreider, who is an acquisitions editor, when she returned her endorsement to me, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, I'll bite. Alice, what's the 11th myth? She said, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a pretty good myth, Alice. And so what I decided to do when I was writing the book is I wrote that chapter and we designed it to look exactly like the book. And somebody can get that from me for free. All they do is they go to terrylinks.com /11th myth, 11th myth. And put your first name and your email address in there, and then you'll get the 11th myth for free.
Amazing. Well, Terry, as we're landing the plane here, if people were to take one overall message or concept from our conversation today about book publishing, doing it right, being consistent, all of the amazing things we talked about, what do you hope that one takeaway idea should be?
I hope the one takeaway will be that as authors, we need to take 100% responsibility for our own success. And so we really need to take action day in and day out to really get our books out there in the best kind of way. That's why, David, in every chapter of this book, I had a myth buster action, which is a practical action step that every author can take. The other thing that I've done with 10 Publishing Myths here is I've tried to make it really easy for people to get this book. So I've made a website, publishingoffer.com. If somebody goes there, they can see where they can get this book for only $10, including the shipping, along with over $200 worth of free bonuses. Now, these free bonuses are not just funky throwaway bonuses. One of the bonuses, for example, I interviewed a self-published author who's selling thousands of books to public libraries. People don't think about, there's over 9,000 public libraries in this country, and they have budgets. They buy books.
Yeah.
Well, how can you get your book in the library? That's the question that's answered just on this audio. And he gives all the details about what librarian does he pitch? How does he pitch it? How does he mail the book to him? All that kind of stuff. That's a very valuable resource if you take action on that and use it.
Yes, absolutely right. I love that. So all of those links that Terry mentioned, by the way, the publishing offer, the 11th myth, the 11th chapter, and then also the other resource, all of those links will be directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. So Terry Whalin, thank you for being with us. This was so informative, so enlightening, and I think even seasoned authors and experts learned a ton. They should go back, they should re-listen, they should definitely hit all the links in the show notes, and thank you for your generosity of expertise.
Thank you, David. It's really an honor to be here with you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.